Thank you so much, friends. I'm humbled and privileged to be here today. My name is Elad Segal. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DriftSense, and let me take you into my world for 5 minutes or less, hopefully. The problem that we tackle is that $12 billion drift away from growers' pockets each and every year in the US alone. And we ask ourselves why. And the reason for that is that 75% of these pesticide agrochemicals that they're spraying are actually lost. They're not reaching their target. And this causes two huge problems. One, out of the 12, this $8 billion loss is due to yield, not loss of yield due to pests, but loss due to pesticide. Growers are usually spraying less or more than what is needed. So if they spray less, it's quite obvious they need to iterate back into the field, spray more, they're losing time, money, and resources. But the problem here is that they're spraying much more than what is needed. It's exactly as you're going to your pharmacist or your physician, and he's telling you, hey, take these antibiotics for 5 days, not less, not more, because they understand that the bacteria will develop resistance. And this is in the exact same analogy to pesticide and pests. The other problem is the legal side, regulatory side. Growers need to be compliant, they need to be in good agricultural practices, and they have a lot of burden in regulatory. Just to get a hunch, if growers in California spent 12 years ago $130, $150 per acre on regulation, today they spend almost $1,000 per acre. That's insane. Take a look at this map on the Midwest in the US. Every number that we see here is actually a damaged crop, in this case, soybeans. This is a publication that went out around a year and a half ago from phytopathologists and wheat scientists in Missouri and Ohio State University. Every number is damages to crops due to pesticide drift or inaccurate spraying. I want to show you the numbers. More than 2,700 cases only in 1 year by one herbicide, and 4 million acres of soybeans were damaged. And that's not the whole story. So if I'm a grower, say in Indiana or Michigan, and I grow soybeans, and I got hit only once in a year, in only one case, I'm in a debt of $700,000 per this case. That's insane. This is a Jenga Tower, and each one of these bricks, if you take it out, the whole tower obviously collapses, right? So this is what growers see in front of their eyes each and every time that they need to spray. What will you take out? Is it the pesticide and their physiochemical properties, the spraying gear, the regulations, the weather? They can, right? So that is why for the first time, we are distilling one crucial decision, timing, telling them in a very optimal and most concise way when they need to spray to be very, very optimal, spray less and grow more. So just to get a hunch on what exactly do we do. So the input, as you probably already know, these are exactly these one. We are analyzing and extracting and analyzing per plot meteorology in a very high resolution, but that's not all. It's not just about the weather. We are extracting and analyzing the chemical properties of the materials that they're using, the regulatory data and the labels, and of course the spraying gear. Why? Because there isn't in this world two growers whatsoever. They are identical. And this is exactly how we should tackle this problem. These data, big data, and all of the information, it funneled into two proprietary segments of technology that we're developing. One, dispersion models. What happens to the material from the moment it is out of the nozzle and until it should hit the target. And these insights go back into machine learning algorithms because, again, at the end of the day, say we're all the same growers doing the exact same things, but I'm spraying with a drone and you guys spray with a boom tractor or a crop duster, it is different by tens of percentages one from another. And this is the way one should take a look at. At the end of the day, our growers are getting a SaaS or a TaaS, we like to call it, timing as a service, very lean, without any hardware, software only. What is the best timing for them to spray? They're saving money, time, resources, and of course, making this world greener. We are the right team to tackle this problem. I hold a PhD in chemistry and material science from Bar-Ilan University. Our CTO, Dr. Pavel Kunin, holds a PhD from Tel Aviv University in geophysics and atmospherical sciences. And our chief operational, Dr. Ran Shauli, holds a PhD in political science and was the chief advisor for the head of the Israeli Plant Protection and Inspection Services. If you'd wish, we are a trio of chemistry, environmental regulations, and atmospherical science. We have validated this idea with more than 200
time's up. Sorry.
Yes. Okay, I'll just go to the
almost the entirety.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No worries at all. Yeah. That was a great pitch. Thanks for kicking it off and sharing a little bit more. Daniel, Michael, do you guys have questions for Elad and DriftSense?
So the slide that you were going to talk about next with the 200 plus, I'd actually like to hear what you were going to say with that slide.
Sure. So we're started from Anbog Ventures here in Barnard University, and they told us, don't write a single line of code. Go talk to the people that are boots on the ground, and they have the knowledge for you to understand what is exactly the problems that you're tackling, right? Nobody wants to build a solution in the garage and find out after a lot of time and money it fits no one. This is exactly what we've done. We went to California and the Midwest. We were there like a month and a half, and ever since we met more than 200 stakeholders, including growers, academia, regulators, the Californian EPA, Department of Pesticide Regulation, the big agrochemical companies, vineyard managers, and so on and so forth. We were in UCLA, in Davis, in Berkeley. We've talked to anyone that we could to try to understand and tackle this problem of pest management. It's a huge problem in agriculture, and we wanted to make sure that we're coming to suck up all this knowledge, understand what is the problem, boots on the ground for the growers.
Speaking of boots on the ground, what's your go-to-market strategy? How do you get this in the hands of growers, and how do you scale this quickly? Ag tech is usually incredibly slow.
Correct. So that's a great question. So we cannot, obviously, and it's not scalable to go knocking on doors. So the supply chain agriculture is quite large, I would say. So we start with the growers, go upper in contractors, pest control advisors, certified crop advisors, and you go up in the scale to the agrochemical companies. So we're in the midstream. We are talking to advisors with PCA, CCA, so to speak, spraying contractors, and this is how you can scale very fast. And we have nothing to deploy. We're not doing hardware, we're doing software. It is coming from a very, I would say, scientific based background of, it's not just binary, right? It's not just software. We're understanding the physical properties of movement of materials, of particles. I would say another word on that, Matt. So if you want to get a moisture or you want to get the weather, great, you can put a sensor in the ground. If you want to understand and predict and simulate how exactly for a certain situation, this movement of particles goes away, this is something that it's more into the software, into simulation, deep technology of which is atmospherical based, but also including the phenological state, including the machinery of which the nozzle and, so to speak, the materials go out from. So this is this on this point of view. Go to market is we are going to vineyard. This is the high risk wine grapes, high risk, high yield crop. It means that it takes quite a lot of a time until you get to harvest, and each and every acre is a lot of money. That's quite of a big revenue and margins for the growers. And on the other side, if it's sprayed or treated inaccurately by pesticide and agrochemicals, that's it. It's getting hurt, it dies, and you need to replant after years. You're losing your job.
Thanks for that. Daniel, Michael?
I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you originally honed in on this as the problem you and your team wanted to solve. Like what brought you to target this particular problem and feel so passionate about it that you wanted to start a company?
That's a great question. So I'm a chemist. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the company, but I'm a chemist. And during my research years here in Bar-Ilan as a master, as a PhD, I always like, visualizing, taking it into the, so to speak, the big world, right? Not just keeping the benefits that we're doing in the laboratory, in vitro, taking it and helping the people out there. And I met my partners, Ron and Pavel, of course, and we tried to understand what's the deal with drift? What's the deal with pesticide when you spray them? And we started here in Israel, and then we went to the US, and we understood that this is a global problem, that a lot of the material is being lost, and growers cannot afford anytime soon, but it's already starting now, to spray more and more and more. That's, by the way, also the same vision that agrochemical companies have. It's not just that they want to sell until infinity. They understand that there's a lot of pests, either if it's herbs, either if it's rodents and fungicides, that are already starting to develop resistance. And we have nothing almost in hand that we can try and overcome this. And that's a huge problem for the whole supply chain, specifically in agriculture, specifically as we need to feed the world by 2030. And we can't. We just can't.
Got it. Awesome.
So Elad, so this is a software-only solution, you mentioned?
Correct.
So there are different ways to deliver these sprays to the crops. Do you account for these different methods and methodologies within your software?
Absolutely. So we're quite agnostic. It means that if you're spraying from a drone, from a crop duster, or from a boom sprayer on the ground, we can do this. We are able to do this. We have, I would say there's around 25 to 30 parameters that are being inserted into our proprietary algorithms. And that's a very good question. By the way, most of the growers are not understanding, or they have no scope to understand, unfortunately, that if you're spraying, let's say that me and you, Daniel, we're the same growers, right? We're using the same materials. We're living in the same region. We're both, we're growing carrots, so to speak. But I'm using a drone with 6 rotors, and you're using same drone, but only with 2. The turbulence and the atmospherical outcomes of what I'm spraying in you, these might be tens of percentages in differences. And this is a pure scientifical based peer review that we already know and took into account. So the answer is definitely yes. This is one of the, I would say, the most crucial parameters to understand how you're spraying with, what's your gear.
And I guess off of that, is the problem at the end of the day those variations in how close these devices get to the plants? Because my understanding, I did air dispersion analysis for a while, is if you have a certain area, there's a percentage likelihood it will hit the designated area versus land on the ground. So I'm guessing the issue is people today just aren't getting close enough given the meteorological conditions.
Just to make just for me to understand clear. So you're asking about our residential areas, or if the grower is hitting,
like specifically, like what the problem is today. Like, is it that the grower is not physically spraying the plants close enough?
Yes, so not quite. So there are specific practices that growers are using. Of course, it depended on the crop and type of gear, but it's not due to that. It's due to all these factors coming together that it's, I would say they are entangled one to another. So let's say that the weather is good and you're spraying in the correct height and you know your tank and your materials and everything, but 1 or 2 or maybe 3 of the parameters you're not taking into account. Say you have some kind of atmospheric problem. Say that your pressure in the spraying tank is not the exact one that should be, and so on and so forth. And each one of them eliminates a good outcome for your spraying. I'll give you another example. So say that you have a drone. These are very or quite of accurate when you're spraying. The problem might be, for instance, and we got approached by drone or spraying drones companies here in Israel and in the US, is that say that you're spraying 30 centimeters or half a meter on the upper point or down, right? From what you need to, it might be 15 to 20% of loss. And these are the most accurate gear that we have today.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
One last question before we move on, Elad. How often are growers spraying? How often do they do this? How many times per season?
Wow, that's that's a huge. I'll try to be specific. So if we're talking about vineyards, it's also dependent if you're, in the northern or southern hemisphere. I would say vineyards around 12 to 15 sprays per season. Season might be 5-6 months, maybe more in less humid regions. But tomatoes for industry for the whole season, every week. Potatoes, maybe 20 times a season. So our go-to-market again is vineyards, wine grapes, specialty crops specifically where the most acute problem with pest management and pesticides is there. But it's very crop and region dependent. But they all suffer one huge problem: the loss of pesticides.
Actually, one more question before we move on. Have you done kind of a cost benefit analysis from the perspective of your buyer to try to help them understand, what money they can save or additional money they can generate when, having higher yields as a result of using your product?
Yes, correct. So a lot of ag-tech startups saying we increase yield, we maximize yield. That's quite of a tricky thing to say. You need to be, boots on the ground for a few years to try to say that. So we're not saying we're maximizing yield. That would be a mistake. We are protecting your yield. So this is one of the niches that we're improving the PBT or, the income of a grower. This is one. Second is we are saving on materials. So it's an average of 30% and more. We've done a successful proof of concept in agricultural environment here in Israel, eight case studies in the US. So one is, of course, protecting the yield. Second is saving on materials and, of course, labor. That's a lot of money. And the third one is regulatory liabilities. All the burden of regulation, we take it off the heads of growers. That's a lot of things you need to do. In California, you need to deliver all the documentation before and after you're spraying. And this is not just in California. There are a lot of regulations in Europe as well. Also in the Midwest, everything should be documented. And that's a lot of a burden to try and digitize everything for a grower. And this is exactly one of the features. This is what we do.